open arms towards the sun. You feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, cause you know the truth, and the truth is love, yes it is. Wasn't what they said to you, or anything that you learned from a book or from the news. It's not like that, cause it's a thing. It is something that you do. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Dib on baby did long. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Doop 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 a doo. Dib on baby did love's the highest truth. Nothing could be higher than love, my friend.
Welcome to the Bassline, everyone. Dr. Rima Laibow is a living legend in medical freedom. She warned of a vaccine genocide decades ago. She's a doctor, but also an astute analyst of the global power structure. It is my distinguished honor to welcome back to the Bassline the remarkable Dr. Rima Laibow. How are you this morning, Dr. Laibow?
I'm fine, thank you. You're very kind. What a nice set of things to say.
Well, I was listening to you on a Twitter space the other night, which was quite a pleasant surprise because I hadn't heard you on Twitter in a while and hadn't spoken to you in a while. And I've been meaning to get you back on this program. There's so many things that are developing so quickly, and we've had so many great guests and so many great guests to come. But when I heard you speaking, I was thinking, we got to get Dr. Laibow back on the show as soon as possible because, as usual, you were just full of knowledge and you were explaining all that you know so well, so passionately. So I would love to jump right back into this critical discussion in terms of the WHO pandemic treaty. You warned us about that the last time we spoke, and it seemed to me that there was sort of a delay in the progress of that. There was something that we sort of celebrated as a small victory, that they didn't get the signatories they needed or something to that effect, that they didn't pass all that they wanted to pass. But we know these people are not the type of people to just take their ball and go home. So where do we stand in terms of the WHO pandemic treaty and some of those things you warned about previously?
Let me be very, very blunt, as is my habit. The people who are misleading, who are leading you to focus on the WHO pandemic treaty are either misinformed and therefore not good sources of either information or understanding, or they are intentionally misleading and therefore terrible sources of information and understanding. The pandemic treaty is as much a red herring as the pandemic. We never had a pandemic. I said from the beginning there were no excess deaths, therefore there was no pandemic. But if you take away the definition of what a pandemic is, then anything can be a pandemic because you say it is so. When Lewis Carroll wrote his very, very interesting and humorous poem called The Hunting of the Snark, the bellman who is leading the hunting. Of course, there's no such thing as a snark. Hint, there's no such thing as a pandemic in a modern society. Modern societies do not have pandemics. Pandemics occur when there is inadequate sanitation, inadequate hygiene, inadequate nutrition. And although our nutrition is terrible, it's not bad enough to cause pandemics. So unless you have a novel disease that we have no resistance to, causing a high number of deaths, you don't have a pandemic. We didn't have one. We didn't have any excess deaths anywhere in the world until the jabs, misnamed vaccines, were rolled out. Now this has become available knowledge, but it's what I was saying way, way back at the beginning of this twinkle toes nonsense called "You got to be really afraid because we're in the midst of a pandemic." By the way, the other thing that killed people was malpractice, mistreatment, medical murder. The entire thing is an iatrogenocide, both the so-called vaccines and the medical protocols, remdesivir, midazolam, ventilators, all of that is iatrogenocide, doctor-delivered genocide. So now the pandemic prevention, and preparedness, is in fact a red herring to get your eyes off and your attention off and your political muscle off the real problem. The real problem, and by the way, one of the things that has been correctly said, mostly by James Roguski, is that the entire pandemic preparedness nonsense is really a business plan. It's a way to get money, lots and lots and lots of money. It has nothing to do with health because the World Health Organization is misnamed. It has nothing to do with health. If it were properly named, it would be called the World Holocaust Organization because it is a tool of depopulation and tyranny, like everything else that the United Nations does, puts out, and then they wrap it in tinsel and tissue and pretty words. But since the organization was founded after the League of Nations failed and we didn't go into the League of Nations, the United Nations was founded as a replacement, and it was explicitly designed and explicitly promulgated and propagated among the movers and shakers as an instrument of one world government and eugenics. Eugenics and depopulation are essentially different sides of the same hideous coin. So we're talking about flim-flam. It is not we didn't win anything when some amendments were not agreed to. The whole process was, and will always be a flim-flam cover-up for taking more control and more control. And when they take control, we lose freedoms. So I am not concerned with the WHO. I am not concerned with the pandemic treaty. When tyrants who like to robe themselves in legalisms and legality and the appearance of lawfulness, which is every modern tyrant, when they want to do that, typically they will give themselves permission to do what they want in many different forms and formats. So even if the pandemic treaty were to vaporize off the table of every tyrant, out of the computer of every bureaucrat around the world, even if it were to disappear within the next 10 seconds, it wouldn't matter. Why wouldn't it matter? Because the United Nations, which is the source of all our woes, let me say that again, the United Nations is the source of all our woes, and I'll come back to that in a moment. The United Nations granted itself world governance authority on September 22nd of this year when it adopted, when the General Assembly, and the United Nations is also misnamed. Really, we should be calling it the unelected nobodies. That's what UN really stands for. It is nothing more than a private club of people like the Good Club of uber billionaires who have decided that they know how to run the world. Well, that's nothing new. John D. Rockefeller Sr., back before the turn of the century, decided that he knew how to run the world. And he enlisted a bunch of his really super wealthy captain of industry friends into putting up some money, not very much for them, but a huge amount of money in today's dollars, putting up some money to set up structures to start the takeover of the world. Now, this has been going on for about 145 years. So if the pandemic treaty were to disappear tomorrow, they have the Pact for the Future, the Global Digital Compact, and the Compact for the Future. These three documents, which are all part of what they themselves, not we, not you, not I, but they themselves call United Nations 2.0. And by the way, you can go online and look up United Nations 2.0. What they say is, oh, the world is a terribly, terribly complex and dangerous place. Of course, they have worked very hard to help make it a very complex and dangerous place. But, oh, the world is a terribly dangerous place, and we are in a constant state of crisis. So let's just declare, okay, we're in a constant state of crisis. And in that constant state of crisis, we have economic crisis, and which they've helped to create, and agricultural crisis, which they've actually entirely created. And, oh, Lord help us, we have global warming, which is a nonsense flim-flam. And we have possible invasions by aliens from outer space. I kid you not, that's in there. And we have wars, which they make. And I think they go on and they list all the terrible, cataclysmic, disastrous, awful things that could happen. And, of course, there's disease. There's always disease. Of course, they have biosecurity labs, so there'll always be new diseases if we let them have their biosecurity toys. Anyway, they say the world is so interdependent and so complex. I'm going into another room because I am on a phone and don't have noise-canceling headphones. Just a moment.
No problem. No
Okay.
problem. Take your time, Doctor.
They say there's so much complexity that the only way that we can handle this is to have a central authority. And it just happens to be us. We're the new world government. Now, how did they get to be the new world government? They appointed themselves. They're the class bully that other people are perpetuating the bullyship of by giving them money. In the schoolyard, it's gum and the answers to the test. Here, it's a little bit more sophisticated, but it's the same principle. And so they have decided that they will take over world governance. Now, there's another trick that they have. And so the reason I'm not concerned with the World Health Organization, which is only a subsidiary body of the unelected nobodies club, the United Nations, the reason I'm not concerned with the World Health Organization, so-called, is that the real strategy is not to keep lopping at the tips of the tentacles of the beast. The real strategy is to kill the beast. Now, in the United States, right now, there is a bill before the United States Congress. That bill is called, and the words are very important, the Disengaging Entirely from the United Nations Debacle. It was introduced into the Senate by Mike Lee of Utah as S3428. It was introduced into the House jointly by Chip Roy of Texas and Mike Rogers of Alabama as H.R. 6645. It is critically important that we compel the United States Congress to pass the bill and withdraw the United States from the United Nations. Why? Because, first of all, sadly, the dark heart of globalism is the United States. The United States is the beating, driving heart of the United Nations. And in spite of the propaganda, the United Nations was founded to do exactly what it is about to do, which is destroy humanity from the DNA outward, from transhuman Internet of Bodies enslavement, from which there is no no subsequent freeing of humanity, by the way, because if you change our DNA, we are no longer the same species. And the ability to determine our fate on a sovereign nation status and the ability to determine our fate on a sovereign person status. And I'm not talking about common law, non-common law. I'm talking about personal autonomy, informed consent, where you live, what you eat, whether you reproduce, what you do for work, whether you have work, whether you're alive. Those choices of personal autonomy and sovereignty are explicitly removed. Removed from us by these unbelievably evil destructocrats. And therefore, it is critically important that we compel the Congress of the United States, and we have the power to do this. We compel the Congress of the United States to pass this bill and then to override the inevitable Oval Office sock puppet veto. It doesn't matter which sock puppet is sitting in the Oval Office. It will be vetoed, and therefore we need a two-thirds majority to override the veto. This is critically important because it's critically important for 1,000 different reasons, but one of the interesting reasons is that the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights declare that we have rights that we cannot be separated from. They're called inalienable rights. And those rights are ours. We have to fight for them in the court sometimes, and we have to beat back legislation that encroaches on them and so on. But those rights exist without anyone's permission. Under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is, of course, a universal stripping of human rights, it is the United Nations foundational document. Under that document, we have no rights. We have rights unless laws are passed taking away our rights. And again, under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations, everything that anyone, individual or country does must be in harmony with the purposes and programs of the United Nations. Now, those two documents are fundamentally incompatible. They are diametrically opposed to one another. And we in the United States have a critical decision to make. Either we are a people with a rule of law at our fundamental base, and we adhere to that rule of law called the Constitution of the United States, or we surrender the rule of law to the unelected nobodies. And by the way, I have a document that people can read that makes it clear that we never had a legal, lawful relationship with the unelected nobodies, that Harry Truman flim-flammed the Congress of the United States while the propaganda effort was going on to flim-flam the people of the world about what the United Nations was, because it is essentially nothing, and we have only a fraudulent relationship with it. So when people go to Prevent Genocide 2030, Prevent Genocide 2030.org, they can do two things. They can take the 10 Million Patriot Challenge, which allows them to quickly and easily send a letter to their members of Congress, alert their friends, neighbors, co-workers, family, etc., their circle of influence, and get them involved. And, actually, it allows them to do a number of things. But one of the things that's there in step 5 of the 6 simple, quick, and effective steps to literally save humanity, one of the things that's there is the legal memo, which is not in technical language, the legal memo that lays out why we do not have either a binding or a legal relationship with the United Nations or any of its bodies. Now, a little while back, I said each and every one of our troubles, our sorrows, springs directly from the United Nations. That's a very big statement. Well, whatever you're concerned with, whether it's human trafficking or the sexualization of children or uncontrolled migration or the corruption of our judicial system or the economic disaster that we are in, or any other problem, or our terrible food system, or and crashing health status, our hideously bad maternal infant mortality rates, worst of any developed country, and then worse than most third world countries. Whatever problem attracts your attention, our declining infrastructure, the crumbling bridges and roads, whatever it is that you think is of major significance, first of all, you're right. And second of all, it springs directly from United Nations policies, which we are illegally and unlawfully implementing as if they were treaty obligations. For instance, when Governor Greg Abbott in Texas wanted to close his border, the Department of Homeland Security, which of course is the Department of Homeland Insecurity, and we've certainly seen that with the hurricane response in the southeast part of the United States, when he tried to close the border, the Department of Homeland Security went to the Supreme Court that day and sought an emergency writ to prevent him from doing so. And the Supreme Court came back and said, Governor Abbott, you cannot close your border to the unlawful entry of undocumented people who have, according to U.S. law, no right to be in the United States. Why can't you do that, Governor Abbott? You can't do that because under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Universal Declaration on the Rights of Migrants, people have a right to go anywhere they want as migrants without documentation, and the country that they come to must support them with housing and clothing and medical care and education and financial support and work employment, even if their own citizens are not entitled to those benefits and at the expense of their own citizens' rights and property. That's a United Nations mandate. Governor Abbott said, well, screw you, and went ahead and closed the border, and we very nearly had a shooting war there. Now, 25 governors of other states said, yeah, we like that. We're going to do that. We're in the same, we take the same position. So the government actually was doing something correct in that case, and the federal government backed down because they were not yet ready to have a shooting war over this issue. But the entire migration problem, the gangs taking over parts of cities, the criminality, the economic disruption, the cost, this is all directly because of UN policy, which our country is acting as if we were obliged to follow, when in fact we're not. And it goes on and on and on and on. So the pandemic treaty is just one little twinkle toe tap dance magic trick misdirection. Look over here. Don't look over there. Well, where's the there that we should not be looking at? The there that we should not be looking at is the interlocking legislations like the Canadian horror bill C-293, which are being passed in every country in the world. And those interlocking including the United States, and those interlocking legislations operationalize the, quote, Sustainable Development Goals, that's Agenda 2030, and they operationalize what we think of as the Pandemic Protection and Preparedness Treaty, the business plan for total subjugation of every aspect of our lives, our freedoms, our rights, our DNA, our property, and compressing the few people who remain into 15-minute cities where they will be fed, and I quote, alternative proteins, which means, bugs and laboratory-created slime passed off as food. The situation is absolutely dire. I have been compiling, along with my friend and colleague from Canada, Connie Shields, a list of all of the legislations around the world that operationalize this nightmare that I'm talking about. In the United States, for example, in 2019, we had a bill passed whose number is 116-22, Public Law 116-22. Public Law 116-22 says, we have problems. Oh dear, we have such terrible problems. And these problems are global. And in order to deal with it, we need to cooperate fully with the global organization which will save us. And of course, they talk about pandemic preparedness and so on. Now, what this means, let's talk about Bill C-293. And by the way, if you're a Canadian listening to this broadcast, when you go to preventgenocide2030.org, preventgenocide2030.org, there is a special section for you to take action to prevent the final adoption of Bill C-293. Bill C-293 cancels the Canadian courts. Bill C-293 gives entire and total power over every aspect of life in Canada. Property rights mean nothing. Your personal choice, your informed consent, etc., mean nothing. Well, that bill was sneaked through the House of Parliament and is now awaiting confirmation by the Senate. American listeners and other listeners might not know that in Canada, the House of Parliament is elected. Excuse me. The members of the Senate are appointed by the Prime Minister. So the Senate is a mere rubber stamp organization. Therefore, it is critically important that people take action in Canada, and we've made it very simple. It's just a matter of a few computer keystrokes and a mouse click to send them a letter saying, don't you dare, don't you dare. Well, so far, we have managed to prevent the Senate of Canada from adopting C-293. How do we know that? Because the president of the Senate of Canada, Pamela Whelan, said, there's been so much noise we haven't been able to pass the bill. Well, that's interesting because we're the noise. Now, in the United States, we need to be the noise. We need to demand of the members of the House and the Senate that they exit the United States from the United Nations debacle entirely. That means pushing every unit of the United Nations out of the United States. That's essential. All their organizations are involved with municipal governance, with state governance, with education, with transportation, with food production and supply, with municipal fund allotment, et cetera. Because at the same time that they've been working on the geopolitical level, these very, very clever and very evil monsters have for many decades been organizing what is being called the municipal deep state. They have created a situation of municipal capture. Every municipality in the world, and of course that includes the United States, is now operating on guidelines that have been given to them as modern governance by the United Nations and its various agencies. And of course, that means that property rights and that zoning and that agriculture and that all the other things that a town might choose to do to regulate for itself no longer are regulated by the people. They are regulated by the mandates of the now governing body, which is, believe it or not, the United Nations. Why are they governing your county, your town, your zoning? Because they are in the process of finalizing the takeover of everything, unless, of course, we stop them. And that's why we created the 10 million. I have to go into the other room again, don't I? That's why I created, along with my colleagues from around the world, the 10 million Patriot Challenge.
Right. Well, this is outstanding information.
PreventGenocide2030.org.
Right. PreventGenocide2030.org. I want to segue into the next segment of the program here in terms of this is overwhelming information. It's profound information. It's extremely important information. But for the average person trying to survive, we're trying to raise our kids, trying to afford overpriced groceries, try to deal with, difficult to deal with employers and all these various economic and social challenges that we face. Could you give us a little outline or an introduction to sort of the self-defense concepts that we can employ for the new citizen that's facing this brave new world? What are some of the things that we as citizens can start implementing in a practical way to start getting more connected with the relevant information and just to protect our families in general?
That is such a good question, because I live and breathe this nightmare, and I haven't even touched the new complexity that we've just discovered. It is absolutely overwhelming, even for those of us who are dedicated 24/7. I work about 20 hours a day on a completely volunteer basis to understand what's going on and to find strategically useful ways of not letting it happen. And it is overwhelming. So there are two basic principles that apply here. The first is a very old one. You know, the people who set up this country said, unless the people who live in the country, unless the citizens stay involved, stay informed, and keep control of the mechanisms of government, of the towns, of the cities, of the states, and of the national activities, then they will lose what we've created for them. They will lose their freedoms, and the governance will revert to the old system, to tyranny, to monarchies, to centralized control, and the people will have lost their representative democracy. Turns out that's true. How many of you have made the time to go to the school board meeting? How many of you have made the time to go to the county commissioners or whatever the equivalent is in your town or your county? How many of you are reading the municipal plans? All of those municipal plans and all of the edicts that are being given by the administrative staff to the people that we elect in school boards and towns and cities and states, all of those edicts come directly through the United Nations control system. And it is up to us to make time in our busy, distracted lives, which, by the way, are engineered by the social engineers to be busy, distracting, filled with things that we have to scrabble really hard to master and to not be destroyed by. This is a plan. This is an explicit plan. Our health has been degraded. It's not an accident. Our food has been degraded. It's not an accident. Food is degraded because of the very specific actions of Codex Alimentarius. Codex Alimentarius is the food regulating body for the entire world. And the big dog there, and I know because I've attended endless Codex meetings around the world, the big dog there is the United States and the pharmaceutical industry. They want you sick because then they get to sell you drugs for as long as they can keep you alive, and then they go on to the next sick person. This is, and by the way, that's all wound up with the ethos of genocide. So the first thing that you can do is be involved on a civic level and speak up, and don't be afraid to oppose what's being brought forward. The second thing you can do is stop believing your doctors. I'm an MD. I went through medical school. I have licenses in 2 states. I have inactive licenses in a bunch of other states. I know what medicine says. Physicians are propagandized puppets who have been propagandized by the pharmaceutical industry. The intention of the pharmaceutical industry is not to make you well. Allopathic medicine does not cure disease. It suppresses symptoms and then gives you more symptoms that you have to suppress. Now, that doesn't say anything about the personal motivations of the misguided, miseducated puppets known as physicians. Maybe they're good people. Maybe your kid's pediatrician is still so dunderheaded that he or she believes that injecting pus and poison into your kid is going to help make your kid healthy. Of course, that's illogical and has been a lie since the very beginning. But maybe they believe that because people who have been propagandized and educated in cult training systems, which is what allopathic medicine is, like law, like other professions, they tend to really emotionally cling to what they've been taught because they have so much at stake doing so. But it doesn't matter what they believe. If they're wrong, they're wrong. A white coat does not make you wise. It makes you the wearer of a white coat. And if your research tells you that you should not be injecting your child with anything and tells you that you should not be injecting yourself with anything, if your research tells you that when you get a cold, instead of taking antibiotics, you can take slippery elm for the sore throat and elderberry to enhance your immune system, do that. If your wisdom tells you that your medicine is making you sick, you know what? Your medicine is making you sick. So the second thing that ordinary, regular people can do is look for natural, non-toxic ways to take care of their health, both by preventing disease and by treating conditions that occur. I'm 81 years old. I have a naturopath as my personal physician. I saw him the other day because I dropped into his office to drop something off. But as my physician, I don't need him. I maintain my own health. If something cataclysmic happened, I would go to him, and I would receive intravenous nutrition of nutrients. I would receive herbs. I would receive natural things that, in fact, would support my health rather than degrade and destroy it despite the propaganda. That's the second thing that people can do. The third thing that people can do...
Let me say quickly before you continue, Dr. Laibow, if you would like to speak to Dr. Laibow, please call 888-874-4888. We'd love to hear from you. We are down to the final quarter of the program. We are running out of time, and Dr. Laibow necessarily has more information in her vast knowledge than she can share in this one episode. But we want to definitely make sure that we can keep in touch with you, Dr. Laibow, and follow all of your forthcoming work. But if you'd like to speak to Dr. Laibow, please call 888-874-4888. We hope to sneak in a call or two before the end of the program. But please organize.
But don't call me asking for specific treatment for your ailment or your
right. That's one thing. We're not here providing medical advice or treatment for anyone's particular concerns.
I can do that once we establish a doctor-patient relationship, and that's a different thing.
Right. I'd also like to ask that please try to have an organized question for Dr. Laibow because of time constraints. Today would not be a good episode to get into personal anecdotes or extensive philosophical statements. As much as we love the opinions of the learned listeners of this program, we are under time constraints. So if you'd like to join us, call 888-874-4888. But please continue with your list, Dr. Laibow. You are up to number 3. And also make sure to give us information as to how we can keep track of your prolific work.
Let me do that first, and then I'll go back to number 3.
Okay.
I have a Substack. There is no paywall. I believe life-saving information should not be for sale. It is called Dr. Rima Truth Reports, DRRIMA, Truth Reports, .substack.com. Dr. Rima Truth Reports, .substack.com. And I read every comment and very frequently reply to them. So that's a way to keep up. I also have 2 podcasts. They are both available on Rumble. The first podcast is on Tuesday, and it's called the Dr. Rima Truth Reports. And the second podcast is on Saturday, and it's called Catalytic Conversations, and that tends to be a round table. And they're pretty important and provide a lot of, I hope, interesting and useful information. So Dr. Rima Truth Reports and Catalytic Conversations can both be either watched live stream or later at Rumble, and the channel is People for FOR, People for People 2022. People for People 2022. And I hope you will watch and share that information. Now, number 3 is you have a mouth. You will have fingers that type. Use them. If you have critically important information and you don't share it, you have participated in the censorship that is destroying our First Amendment rights and all of our other rights. John Kerry, who ran for president in 2000, and John Kerry, the same John Kerry who was the Secretary of State, told the World Economic Forum, another private club of evildoers, linked very closely to the United Nations, the one headed by Klaus Schwab, who says, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And he really means that. You will eat the bugs, and he really means that. That same Klaus Schwab. John Kerry is Klaus Schwab's buddy, and he recently told the World Economic Forum meeting that the biggest impediment to their winning, their side having a victory over us and destroying humanity, is the United States Constitution's First Amendment, which he said must be hammered out of existence. You must speak. You must continue to speak. Controlled opposition means people who are doing what the other side wants them to do and say, and it also means our censoring ourselves and not saying what we know to be true. Your friends and neighbors, relatives, co-workers, co-religionists, co-PTA parents know you and they trust you. And you need to have the courage to speak what other people are not speaking, because you are more of an authority in their eyes than I am. They don't know me. They know you. And if you believe something to be right, or if you believe something to be wrong, you need to speak it. The most important thing that's wrong right now is that the United States and every other country is in a fraudulent, illegal relationship with a group of self-defined tyrants who are actively in the process of destroying everything that you ever thought of as a right. If you own a house or an apartment or a car, you won't. It will be gone. It will be taken from you. If you make food choices that satisfy you, that's over under their reign. If you don't want this treatment or you do want that treatment, forget it. That's over, because your body belongs to them under what they've created. And the fourth thing that you can do is devote a little bit of time every day, even if it's only 10 minutes, and I'm quite serious about that. Devote a little bit of time every day to learning about something that you're worried about, that you're concerned about, looking for the roots of the problem. I guarantee you that you will find information that will motivate you to do the things that I've been talking about, to become civically involved, to speak to the people that you can reach and help them understand what's going on, to stop taking the word of doctors as if they know about your body. You know more about your body than they do, I guarantee you. And so they know more about drugs than you do, but you know more about health than they ever will. And so those are things that ordinary people can do. Find people that you like and that you trust. And if they're saying things that ring wrong, they're probably wrong. Your gut instincts are still your best guide to what's true and what's not true, which means you're going to make some mistakes, but oh well, everybody does. But you need to trust your gut. Anthony Fauci, whom we know to be a monumental war criminal, Anthony Fauci said, trust the science. And then he said, I am the science. Now, anybody with even a third of a neuron working in their body, anywhere in their body, would know that that's just wrong. Anybody's gut would say, wait, what? And that's what we should follow. The wait, what? What are you talking about? That doesn't make sense. Because if you hear it from the lips of somebody in power and it doesn't make sense, it really doesn't make sense. So you need to trust your innate wisdom. You're a human being. You've lived a certain number of years. You have lots of experiences, and they count. You're being told that you don't count, but you do. And we have to disengage entirely from the United Nations debacle. That's where the hard work begins. We get to rebuild society and undo the monumental and careful destruction that the destructocrats have woven into our society for 145 years.
I love that term, the destructocrats. Well, we have an astute caller, Lincoln from Mount Vernon, on the line. How are you today, Lincoln? Do you have a question for Dr. Rima Laibow?
Yeah, how are you, Jeremiah?
Very good. Thanks for calling.
I also want to let you know quickly that I'm also a chess player. Would love to hook up with you and play you sometime.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just a quick one. Dr. Laibow, it was wonderful listening to you. And I don't know where you stand on this, but this is not fashionable to say. But everything you've articulated today, and especially about Codex Alimentarius and especially the World Economic Forum, to me, it's what is not fashionable to say. This is coming straight out of Revelations, where it speaks about there will come a time when we will have no control unless we are completely subject to this system. What is your response to that?
Well, actually, it's very fashionable to say there are a great many people who are pointing to end times and revelations and biblical predictions of exactly what we're seeing. And my response is, what we're seeing now is the dearest wish of every tyrant who's ever lived anywhere in the world. People haven't changed all that much in what makes them happy and what they do for evil. What's changed is the technology with which they can do it. Why didn't John D. Rockefeller Sr. and his predatory philanthropist clan, his friends, do back 145 years ago what they're doing, what his sons and daughters and spiritual heirs are doing now? Well, they didn't have the technology; they had to buy the technology.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
The point that I'm making is maybe the biblical predictions were in fact what people who adhere to them believe them to be, that is divinely inspired, and maybe these are the times that they were talking about. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not an expert on on those areas, but I do know that it's similar to what every evildoer has ever wanted to do. And maybe it was predicted just by a very smart person, and maybe it was predicted by the hand of God. I don't know, but I know what we're living in now is not good, and it looks very much like the utter destruction of humanity unless we stop it.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Lincoln, for calling. If you want to play me in chess, just look me up, Chess NYC Jeremiah on Lee Chess, and send me a challenge. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Let me know. I'll be in Marcus Garvey Park on a regular basis. It's, what is my handle on Lee Chess? It's Chess NYC Jeremiah, JEREMIAH, at Lee Chess, LIChess.org. So absolutely send me a challenge over there. I'll be happy to play you in any time format you prefer. You want to make moves every second, we could play 1 minute chess. If you want to play one move per week, we could do that too. But thank you for calling in. Dr. Laibow, would you be available to do a Twitter space sometime soon? I would love to have a conversation that doesn't have to get interrupted after an hour. And also, if I could petition you for a follow back on Twitter. You're actually my 31st guest, and I did not realize the perfect symmetry. You are now also my 62nd guest. So I did not calculate that, actually. So
how lovely.
Yeah.
I would be very happy to do a Twitter space. The one that you heard me on was the first one I'd ever been on. So that was a novel experience for me, and I'd be delighted, of course.
Okay, well, excellent. We're unfortunately running out of time. It's 1:58. If you could please find Dr. Laibow on Substack. Please subscribe to her Substack for free. Be a paid subscriber if you can afford to do so. But first of all, subscribe for free. And also, folks, please disseminate this information. Don't be shy about this information. Please transcend your echo chamber. We all need to transcend the echo chamber at this point. We need to figure out
And Jeremiah,
tactics.
if I could urge people to go to preventgenocide2030.org and take the 6-step 10 Million Patriot Challenge. It makes a huge difference.
Excellent. Right. Agenda 2030. So tell us the website one more time, Doctor.
preventgenocide2030.org.
Right. So everyone, please don't keep this to yourself. Not only should you partake in this information, text it to people one at a time. Send it to people on WhatsApp. Post it on Facebook. Post it on Twitter. Sprinkle it all over the place. It does no harm, and you could possibly do a lot of good in helping to recruit more people and help people wake up, because we need more people to wake up. We have some very dedicated activists on the one side. We have these transhumanist ghouls on the other side. And unfortunately, we have this big blubbery blob of people in between who cannot decide what they're going to do and don't realize what's going on. And we need to wake up at least some of those people to have more impact in all of the activism we're going to engage in moving forward. So thank you, Dr. Laibow. It's been an honor, again, to have you on these airwaves. Keep up all the great work. We're big supporters of everything that you're doing, and anything that we can do to help spread the word or to support your efforts, we're honored to do so. Everyone have a great day and a great weekend. Thank you.